So these two chapters on verbal and nonverbal communication really got me thinking about my interactions in the classroom. So for starters, the takeaways from these two chapters, which I felt like were the most important for verbal communication, I found that a lot of the chapter and some part of the videos were talking about how you need to be interested in what they're interested in, right? So you need to engage with students in ways that they feel like you care, all about that acceptance from the chapter before. Ask them what they're interested in, follow up, and then constantly be interacting with them, either about their interests or just to say hello, just to nod at them in the hallway or to say hi. And then there's also this idea of like watching what you say. I know that in the chapter on verbal communication, the author makes a note about how he always thought this one student was interested in sports because he was good at sports. And it turns out he was interested in movies or entertainment and music, and he realized that this whole time he hadn't been connecting authentically with this child because he hadn't really been interested in what the student was interested in, and he hadn't been communicating effectively in the way he was talking and what he was talking about. And I thought that was really interesting. And so along with what you're saying is kind of how you're saying it, and is that tone of voice that you're using. And then even further is those nonverbal cues that you're giving students when you are talking to them. So even if you're saying like, yeah, that's a great idea, but you don't look like it's a great idea, if you're rolling your eyes or, subtly shaking them off or turning your back to them, it creates an environment where students don't feel welcome and they don't feel accepted, just solely based off of, your attitude or how you look. Which I think is really key. So when as I'm teaching with my cooperating teacher, I find that I'm using my hands a lot. I find that I'm really trying to get involved. He's videoed me teaching lessons throughout the year, and I'm always very engaged with my hands, which for most of the time, most of the students feel really comfortable with me walking around and pointing and, oh, that's so great, and thumbs upping. But I do have a student I've noticed through the videos who's uncomfortable when I breach her space, right? So when I lean in to say something and I use my hands, she's uncomfortable. And so I've started to adapt and to move, out of her space, but still try to confirm, oh, that's really good. You're doing a really good job, sweetie. Like, keep going. Like, what a good thought. Like, you did really well today, without, invading her personal space. Because what I think is, oh, I'm encouraging her. She's like, whoa, back off. So that was something that I thought that this section was like fresh on my brain anyway before even reading it. And then something else that really caught my attention after watching the videos, after reading the chapter, after watching the videos, is that, one of the first videos where it's the history teacher, his whole thing was about creating like this dominance. I actually have a quote. So it says, he uses body language to make absolutely evident to the children that they are all to be engaged in what he's teaching. So it's all about, asserting his dominance, making sure he's the authority figure in the room, and, he's the leader of the classroom, so it lists dominance, and then after you assert your dominance, then you invite and reinforce. But the whole time, you're still like this authoritarian figure at the front of the classroom, and I felt like that was kind of going against what the book says, in a way, because the book was all about creating this inviting space where, everyone's valued, everyone's equal. The teacher is still the teacher, but we're all on the same playing field when it comes to communication. So I felt like this video was much more about, how the teacher is in charge of the classroom and how the students are supposed to know that through his body language. And that felt contradictory. But it also, it talked about leaning forward, which I've already said was in the book, but made my poor little student uncomfortable. And then when you move into the other videos, so the lesson starters, it felt very calculated. That's the other one that I felt was kind of contradictory. So there's a difference, to me at least, between, thinking of your body language, knowing that I'm using my hands, versus like using this specific piece of body language to convey this specific message all the time. Like, I think there's a difference, and I think you lose that connection with your students and that authentic exchange when you're being so calculated with your body language. I think your students need to know that you're still being real, and it's still at least a little bit of a real-time reaction. Because if you're so calculated all the time and you're always smiling, I think students, at least mine, would pick up on how inauthentic that is. How you're not truly reacting how you would be. Just like they can sense a fake smile, like the guy was saying, they can sense a fake smile. They can sense when you're, not actually caring what's going on. They can sense an empty, like, what's up. So that one also felt a little contradictory to me. The reinforcing learning, I liked how animated the teacher was. I thought it was really cool how much she moved and how much she expressed in her face, and she touched her face when she was thinking and she wanted them to think, and I thought that was really interesting, and she seemed way more authentic than the health teacher in the Lesson Starters video. She was always active and she really wanted the kids to engage, and they responded accordingly. And then also with the engage and motivate video, he was also very inviting, and he did this thing where he pulled it in. He'd be like, oh, that's great, and he'd pull it in. And I really like that because it kind of brought the ideas kind of back to a home base where you could think back through. So I found him to be really refreshing as well. And I felt like both him, the guy who was teaching drama, and the woman teaching the modern languages class, they both did a good job of using their body to invite and to accept all answers, even if it wasn't correct. He wasn't, that's not right. It was more of I completely understand, let's tease through that. And I thought that was really powerful and really beneficial for the students. I feel like this chapter and these videos, have also given me a couple more ways that I could be accepting in my classroom, through my verbal and nonverbal communications written down. So I was thinking, it always mentions to be constantly in contact and interacting with them. So I think saying hello more often, and when they first come in, there's one class where I observe and I'm not doing anything. My teacher, I just sit here to make sure they're not messing around. That's my job. And so I feel sometimes I don't engage with them because I don't think that they care. But I have noticed that, when they say hi and I say hi back, they get really excited. Oh, look, she's alive today. And so I think that if I, said hello, nodded, asked them how they were doing, they would feel more comfortable with me in the classroom, and I would probably be less bored because I have these, I'm looking because I'm in the classroom. I would have these relationships with them through this communication. I also thought about my word choice. I find that I say, ooh, that's not quite it, and that might be a little turn offish to them, oh, well, I'm not quite good enough for you. So I do want to think more about what I say and how I say it. I also, I can't even read my own handwriting. Here it says, I want to be interested in what they're interested in. So, always asking oh, how was your game? Oh, how's this doing? I saw you got injured. How do you feel? I have one student who had a hip injury over Christmas and still can't participate in sports. So I try to find other things to ask him about, because I hate to ask him about sports if he can't run. Obviously he's still limping. So just being interested in what they're interested in, I find that is kind of helping me create relationships with those students who are more distant, because now they have a reason to engage with me. The last two ways I can communicate acceptance better in my classroom, I really thought were more nonverbal. And so for me, it was more of, how am I gonna indicate support? Even if they're not successful in their endeavor, how am I going to indicate that I'm still supportive to them? So I know the book mentioned even just a simple nod or leaning in and being engaged in what they're saying, even if it's a little off the wall or it's not entirely correct, but just being, willing to listen to those responses. And then also actively and authentically listening, not just asking a question and then moving on, but to listen and respond and then to move on, so that they know that no matter what they're saying or when they're saying it, that they're valued, their response and their voice is valued in the classroom. And so that's kind of where I am with this communication is, I think I need to work a little bit on my nonverbal communication, and I definitely need to work on the 5 things I just listed to help me better accept my students. So just a kind of a side note though, I took a nonverbal communication class for my interim, my freshman year in college, and it was the coolest thing. It still has stuck with me today. When people cross their arms or when they cross their legs towards the door, you can kind of tell if they're ready to go. And so I think it's so fascinating that that is such a big factor in teaching is, how you're communicating nonverbally. And I think it's just so cool how things always seem to like build on each other, I guess is what I'm saying. So something I learned, so long ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, is still really important and to what I'm trying to do now in my like current career goal. But I think that's really cool, and I think it's really important too to kind of read the room. They always say as like a speaker to read the room, as a teacher to read the room, and I think it's really has been impactful since then, since I took the class, and it's now even more impactful realizing just how much nonverbal communication factors into like your classroom environment. So I think I just thought it was so cool. I thought you would think it was cool too. So here we are, communication, huge, verbal and nonverbal, and yeah, that's where we are.